United States Army presents The Big Picture, an official report produced for the armed forces and the American people. Now, to show you part of the big picture, here is Sergeant Stuart Queen.
"1958 marked the 16th anniversary of Army aviation. Although within the Army itself, the development of Army aviation is considered to be one of the most significant of modern times, this function still is little known or understood outside the service. Three factors are indispensable to victory in war: firepower, mobility, and communications. Success invariably goes to the side which has the greatest punch, and along with it, the ability to move in quickly and exploit that punch. In short, the power to outmaneuver and outfire the enemy. The tools and the techniques of war change, but this principle of combat itself remains as true today as it has ever been. For years, indeed for centuries, firepower and mobility were substantially in balance on the battlefield. Warfare was characterized by movement by foot, and soldiers could carry their muskets and drag their cannon with them. On the battlefields of World War I, however, warfare became stalemated. New weapons brought a greater firepower than any army had ever had before. But this technological advance in firepower had outpaced mobility. Troops could not move fast enough to take advantage of their own increased firepower or move against the enemies, and the battleground became stabilized in a system of trench warfare until movement was restored with the development of the tank. Then the Allied armies were able to break out of their containment and begin the advance, which ultimately crushed German resistance. During World War II, firepower and mobility were once again substantially in balance. The ground soldier had the support of a powerful array of armament, and the Army's ability to move had kept abreast of this strength. With the atomic age came the signal that once again firepower was outdistancing mobility. The firepower at the Army's disposal today, nuclear and conventional, is spectacular. But to be able to use it to its fullest advantage, the Army must be mobile enough to move in quickly and exploit it before the enemy can rally to an effective defense. The Army, moreover, must be mobile enough to function on the atomic battlefield that the battlefield of the future may well be. Under conditions of atomic warfare, a field unit will have to be able to operate widely dispersed over great distances in order to survive an enemy atomic attack, and still be able to come together and move quickly in order to follow through on any nuclear assault directed against the enemy. It is for these reasons that your Army works unceasingly to develop the mobility upon which victory in war will depend. It is this effort to increase the Army's mobility which gives Army aviation its vital significance. Army aviation does not in any sense duplicate the tactical missions of the Air Force. The fire support which the Air Force gives the Army and the assistance it provides in increasing the Army's mobility are important to the Army's mission. But these and related functions remain what they have been in two armed conflicts: support given to the Army by a sister service. They are not Army functions. The Army is concerned, as it has always been, with the land battle, and the function of Army aviation is solely to increase the Army's ability to win the land battle by increasing its mobility within the confines of the battlefield itself. On 65,000 acres of ground in southeast Alabama, and in the skies above it, stands the home of Army aviation, Fort Rucker. Of the best is the motto of the men who have learned to fly the machines which give the Army a new dimension in mobility. Graduation Day at Fort Rucker marks the end of an arduous training period, but also the beginning of a new phase in the careers of the men who have made it. For them and for their families, it is a time of pride. The mark of the Army pilot is the mark of skill and devotion, endurance and toughness. The story of Army aviation is the story of no one branch of the Army, but rather the story of a new and rapidly growing development whose effect is felt throughout the Army in almost every branch of its service. It is the vigorous story of youth and new ideas. It is properly the story of the young men who qualify as its pilots. Men like First Lieutenant Ralph Ferguson. They are the inheritors today of a tradition which began in the skies over North Africa during the first year of American involvement in World War II. The mission was strictly that of observation for the adjustment of artillery fire. Those first months of trial in combat were difficult ones. The restrictions placed on the first planes in action limited their activities considerably. According to approved doctrine, flights were to last no longer than necessary for one artillery adjustment, an estimated maximum time of 7 minutes over our gun positions. The plane was actually an elevated observation post to be used for the direction of artillery fire only under emergency conditions. Even under these restrictions, however, the success of aerial observation was soon demonstrated. By the end of World War II, light aviation, proved in battle, had come to be recognized as an indispensable part of the Army. When the challenge of Korea came, aircraft had been improved and their mission of observation well established. They were the eyes of the artillery, and most observed fire in Korea was adjusted from Army aircraft. At the same time that light aircraft was demonstrating its effectiveness in directing artillery fire, the fast-moving history of modern warfare was revealing other areas in which the speed and mobility of aircraft could be used to priceless advantage. Ground-rooted man, for all of his progress, was at the mercy of the terrain within the battle zone. A river of mud could halt the course of battle and even turn a winning tide to defeat. Supply lines, the vital arteries without which a combat effort dies, could be strained to the danger point and beyond it, and all too often were at the mercy of impossible conditions imposed by the earth itself. Even the wounded and the men who carry them were forever frustrated by situations beyond anyone's control. The struggle for life in a badly wounded man in need of medical attention depended on variables that could produce tragic results. Yes, the need was there, written on every page of the Army's experience with war in remote lands. The need for the ability to master the terrain or function independently of it. History works in strange ways. It is possible to say now, looking back, that even as the need was being made apparent for a degree of mobility the Army had not possessed, technological progress had brought aircraft to the point where they could provide that mobility. Greater range, greater speed, and greater versatility came with each new model. The most dramatic development of all was the improvement of the helicopter. For several years, it had been a fascinating toy. But now it had reached a technical stage which called serious attention to its amazing powers of maneuverability and its ability to land in an area not much larger than its own dimensions. The helicopter was put to a dramatic test in Korea, the Mercy mission of evacuating wounded soldiers from the hilly, jagged terrain where most of the fighting took place. It was a thoroughly successful test. One medical group with its organic helicopters evacuated more than 20,000 casualties by helicopter. It proved conclusively that along with fixed-wing light aircraft, the helicopter had a definite place in Army aviation. The role of Army aviation has grown enormously in the years since Korea. Its missions are now far more extensive. Important among them is still the Mercy mission of casualty evacuation, a mission much more efficient now because of the steady development of larger helicopters. The helicopter's development has enabled it to contribute to the mobility of the Army in a way scarcely dreamed of in World War II. Troops transported over short distances by helicopter can move toward their objective independent of terrain features. Over obstacles which always before have made military movement difficult, time-consuming, or impossible. Along with their freedom from the tyranny of terrain, combat-ready troops transported by air can move in to close with the enemy in literally a fraction of the time their travel once took. Short-haul transport of critical equipment to forward areas of the combat zone is also a mission which Army aviation can fulfill today, reducing the importance of roads as a logistical factor. The fighting man at the front can be assured of the combat support which makes his fight possible, whatever the nature of the terrain which links him with the rear area. Adjustment of artillery fire, the original mission of Army aviation, is still an important function. But the concept of using aircraft for observation has broadened greatly. The high ground has always been one of the most important pieces of real estate on the battlefield because of its advantage of observation, and the infantryman has had to fight bitterly for it. Now the airplane equipped with TV and other electronic devices can give the commander eyes he never had in battle before. It serves as an observation post, offering a view of the battle area. Aviation gives the commander a great many advantages, such as personal inspection of widely dispersed forces. For the first time in military history, a division commander can inspect all of his units in one day. Although the purpose of Army aviation is support of tactical operations in combat, its pilots have performed with bravery in civil disasters and emergencies. Mercy and rescue missions for people in distress, whether in situations involving a few or in disasters affecting many, have attested again and again the versatility of the machines of Army aviation and the skill and courage of the men who fly them. The men who fly them. That means men like Lieutenant Ferguson, or it will anyway after today, now that their preparation is over.
As much as I've waited for today, I'm sorry to see it end. These past 12 weeks of advanced training have been tough, but I've learned a lot. It wasn't just flying either. We all knew how to fly when we came to Rucker. We got our primary training at Gary Army Airfield, Texas. Came here for tactical training. And what the instructors taught us, we'll really be able to use. Some of the planes we flew weren't very big or flashy, but they were selected for the way they're able to do precisely what the Army needs doing. There was a time when I would have thought any instructor crazy to ask a man to set down in some of the one-horse pastures we get used to, but not anymore. I might have to get in and out of much worse than that someday under noisier conditions. They taught us that so far as we would be concerned on our missions in the future, emergency conditions would be routine conditions. An Army in the field can't take time out to build airports. We spend a lot of our time on the books. They packed a lot of theory into those weeks as well. I know just how important I am to this Army now, and how important Army aviation is if we're going to be able to move a combat-ready force in and out in a hurry, or spot artillery fire, or do a lot of other jobs that can't be done effectively any other way. Instruction in helicopter flying goes on here too. Tactical instruction for rotary wing pilots who've already had their basic flight training. Those of us who've qualified for fixed wing flying are eligible to come back here for helicopter training after we spend a year with troops. I'm looking forward to that. I've flown as a passenger in helicopters, and I know there's nothing quite like it. Flying adds a third dimension to ordinary mobility, but when it's done in a helicopter, you have to add about 6 more. You find out that choppers have to be flown too. Basically, the helicopter is an unstable aircraft. The pilot has to keep his hands and feet and mind on what he's doing at all times. If his performance is good, the aircraft will do as well. Follow us on this ride. Contour flying is a fundamental part of the Army's approach to aviation. The Army's a land force, and our job in combat is to get and keep control of the land. We look upon our flying machines as instruments to help us get from one place to another as quickly as possible, but without sacrificing our control of the land. There are machines which let us do our job in spite of terrain obstacles. They give us mastery over the terrain. We just move along with it, high enough not to be impeded by barriers, but low enough to be out of radar scope, and low enough to use the features of terrain to keep the enemy from seeing us. Not only is the technique of contour flying a tactical necessity, it's also a tremendous thrill. And each time you put down after a workout like this, you feel as if you just had quite an experience. The men who keep the aircraft running get the kind of instruction they need, too. Their theory of instruction is the same as ours. Learn by doing. You find lots of new things around here. Experiments that aren't even part of Army doctrine yet. Take the high-performance aircraft, for instance. It's not really ours. The Air Force loaned it to us. We're using it to study the techniques of observation from high-speed aircraft. Or take the experiments that are being made with armed helicopters. That's one that's being studied very seriously, too. The theory is that a helicopter ought to have the ability to protect itself just as any other vehicle should. It makes sense to me. Everything here makes sense to me. I'm sold on the idea that the Army's future is being molded right here. There isn't any site that will give you any better idea of the changes that have come to our Army than this one. Maybe none of this will ever have to be tested in real war. That's what we're all hoping, of course. But if it does get forced into test by combat, Army aviation will give a great account of itself. Let's put all this equipment on a battlefield, a fictional battlefield, of course, since many of these machines have never seen combat and some of them are still being tested for concept. But let's see what would happen and how they would be used.
This is the battlefield. The enemy is conducting a delaying operation, and our forces are rapidly in pursuit to keep him from reorganizing. The enemy sits beyond that ridge. Our commander has reason to suspect the enemy has a missile emplacement, which he intends to use against us. It is of the utmost necessity that it be destroyed immediately, before it can be employed against our forces. Too much delay will give the enemy the advantage that might prove fatal. The commander orders into operation his fully equipped aircraft, which can make its reconnaissance in a matter of minutes. The pilot accomplishes his mission and relays the information back, and the Army's deadly Corporal missile is launched to seek out and destroy the enemy's missile emplacement. The infantry loads quickly into helicopters. The equipment they will need in combat goes with them. Aerial combat reconnaissance ships with the traditional mission of cavalry screen the area, search out enemy resistance, determine its strength so the job of the main force will be made easier. The weapons with which these helicopters are armed do more than enable the ships to defend themselves. They also enable the craft to perform reconnaissance by fire, an integral part of the cavalry mission. By firing into the enemy's positions and drawing his fire, they can better estimate the enemy's strength. Their easy maneuverability permits the helicopters to take full advantage of the terrain for protection. They can hide, rise and fire, duck down and hide again. Behind the reconnaissance helicopters come the heavier weapon ships. More heavily armed than the reconnaissance craft, they put down a tremendous rain of fire into the enemy area. Behind the helicopter's screen of fire, the infantry unload from the ships which have carried them into the combat area. Close behind the fighting troops come their equipment and the communications which will keep their operation unified. The infantry are able to move in close to the firing helicopters. Under the onslaught of our task force's firepower, the enemy's defenses begin to crumble. In a matter of minutes, a victory is won, which in other circumstances might have taken hours. On this theoretical battlefield, weapons and machines which are in existence today have been combined to demonstrate how a combat action could be fought if war broke out now. Army Aviation, the fastest growing development in military services, is providing the United States Army with the mobility to match its firepower and make it the most effective land force on the face of the earth, and just a little above it. The story of Army Aviation does not end with the demonstration of existing machines and methods you have seen. It is a continuing story, developing as the process of technology on which its future rests develops. Experiments are going on today with machines that are truly incredible. Individual lift devices such as the flying platforms, and others of similar principles and similar purpose. Aircraft of radical design with vertical takeoff and landing powers. And on the drawing boards are machines of even more spectacular possibilities. An aerial jeep, and aerial assault vehicle. A flying crane that will be able to carry as much as 12 tons for distances of 25 to 50 miles. Perhaps not all of these vehicles will actually become realities. The tests that lie between concept and practice are severe ones, but they are representative of the ideas that emerge in the continuous, never-ending effort to develop the Army's mobility, increase it, and increase it still more. There is no doubt that just as aircraft in the last few years have augmented the Army's potential in battle substantially, improved aircraft in the years ahead will develop it further. And in the process, the weapons and the concept of Army aviation may well revolutionize the tactics of ground warfare in the future that lies just before us. Now, this is Sergeant Stuart Queen, your host for The Big Picture.
The Big Picture is an official report for the armed forces and the American people. Produced by the Army Pictorial Center. Presented by the Department of the Army in cooperation with this station. United States Army presents The Big Picture, an official report produced for the armed forces and the American people. Somewhere in enemy territory, soldiers of the aggressor forces man a radar post. A constant threat to the successful operation of our own forces, an obstacle which must be eliminated as quickly and quietly as possible. Out of nowhere, so close to the earth that it is almost part of it, below the range of the enemy radar, comes a task force with a deadly serious mission.
Airborne soldiers on a simulated combat patrol. A swooping surprise raid to knock out an enemy radar post. Then a swift return to their own lines. This is not a hypothetical action. It is standing operating procedure as part of the tactics of the United States Army. The American fighting man is taking to the air in an increasing variety of missions, in small units as well as large, for long and short-range tasks. Aviation has given him a new dimension of movement. Whether he moves by helicopter or transport plane, he is applying his resourcefulness and daring to find new ways of using the supreme mobility that air travel has made possible.
At an airbase on friendly soil, soldiers prepare to go into battle in a way scarcely dreamed of a few short years ago. As soldiers in combat have always done, they move out to engage the enemy, but the sky itself is their line of departure. It was inevitable that the foot soldier would become airborne. Through the long history of warfare, speed and mobility have had a decisive effect on the battlefield. Mobility meant rapid concentration of firepower at critical points. And mobility meant greater survival power for the fighting man because rapid movement made a more difficult target. The foot soldier has always been quick to adapt or improvise artificial means of transportation. Once he made use of the horse. More recently, he adapted the railroad to his needs. And then the truck. The advent of mechanized movement expanded mobility, not only for the foot soldier, but for his weapons as well. Both infantry weapons and supporting arms. But there was a limit to high-speed movement on the ground. Open country is rarely fast. And road travel has problems of its own. True, through his determination, the soldier proved that there was no obstacle of nature or man that could not be crossed. He demonstrated that there was no defense which could not be penetrated, no barrier which could not be scaled. But frequently, these accomplishments could be made only at a great loss of time and mobility. It was inevitable that when the airplane became practical, the foot soldier should see it as the ultimate solution to his problems of mobility, to overcome terrain obstacles by passing over them. World War II saw the first and highly successful use of airborne troops in combat. The Germans dropped troops with great effect early in the war on Norway, Holland, and Crete. Later, Allied airborne troops spearheaded the invasion of Sicily. They cleared the way for the great assault on the beaches of France in the pre-dawn hours of June 6, 1944. The Korean War saw a milestone in sending weapons and supplies by air. The first successful airdrop of heavy weapons in combat was made here. The airborne soldier was established, battle-proven, a commonplace in military thinking. In post-war maneuvers, advances were made in dropping heavier and heavier materiel. The airborne soldier became the supreme example of the classic Army principles of firepower and mobility. The advent of nuclear and missile warfare did not change this concept. On the contrary, it enlarged its importance. The extreme range of missiles provided a consideration of the highest importance. The enormous destructive radius of nuclear arms added immeasurably to that consideration. Together, they made slow-moving concentrations of ground troops suicidal. The capacity for swift movement to achieve maximum dispersal was vital, and so was swift movement to reconcentrate the enormous firepower of the modern fighting division. First step in meeting this need was to reorganize the division from its massed 3-regiment structure into 5 smaller, mobile, self-sustaining units called battle groups. A battle group, such as this one which has been massed on a parade ground for photographic purposes, is in effect a fighting machine capable of great independence on the battlefield. It can disperse into any number of smaller units over an area of considerable distance when circumstances demand dispersal. It can come together quickly to deliver a massive blow when the target presents itself, and then rapidly disperse once more. Its communications unites it into a cohesive group, however widely scattered it is. Its weapons, and the weapons which stand behind it, which it can call upon for support, make it hard-hitting. But mobility is its prime characteristic. It is, in every sense, a modern, basic fighting unit, perfectly tailored to the needs of a modern army. It was only natural that the most highly mobile of all divisions, the Airborne, would be the first to be reorganized under the pentomic concept. The reliability of airborne movement led to bold new thinking in military science, both strategic and tactical. Ceaseless communist probing at soft spots in the free world, either through subversion or outright incitement to riot, had imposed on the free world's leader, the United States, the obligation of being prepared to lend military support swiftly to any free world nation calling for support against communist pressure or any other form of hostile aggression. To answer this global need, the United States Army formed STRAC, the Strategic Army Corps, whose slogan is skilled, tough, ready, around the clock. STRAC consists of several of the Army's crack fighting units in the United States. The 4th Infantry Division, the 82nd Airborne, the 101st Airborne, and the 1st Logistical Command. Readiness, on literally a moment's notice, is the distinguishing characteristic of STRAC units. Planes of the United States Air Force, with help from the Navy and the Military Air Transport Service, are prepared to fly our airborne soldiers anywhere in the world at any time. Exhaustive studies and practice have refined procedure to a split-second schedule. The first element of STRAC airborne troops can be in the air in 2 hours. Its leading company in only 15 minutes. Afterward, an entire division, if necessary, complete to the last clerk and bullet, can be moved to its destination in 6 days or less. Procedure follows battle-proved design. Giant transport planes can make long-range flights to drop important elements of an airborne division deep in enemy territory. ahead is seized by airborne soldiers. Some of them parachute from their planes. Others are air-landed. Unloading is swift and precise. Strak airborne forces are ready for instant deployment in battle. They fly to fight with the ammunition, food, and supplies needed to sustain them in combat before being resupplied. The Strak concept paid off brilliantly in Lebanon in the Middle East. Political forces outside the country threatened the overthrow of the democratic government. The United States, at the request of Lebanon, landed Marines from the 6th Fleet and flew in airborne reinforcements from Germany. The discreet, restrained presence of these troops calmed Lebanon and enabled a democratic election to be held. After this was accomplished, the troops withdrew without incident. This bold, strategic use of the airborne soldier is being matched by innovations in tactics. The Army's own aviation organized for movement in and around the battlefield, helicopters and light planes, short-range aerial vehicles of great versatility. These give the airborne soldier the means to perform raids, reconnaissance in force, flanking attacks, slashing penetrations to the enemy's rear, a third-dimensional cavalry striking through the air with a speed, surprise, and shock power far beyond their predecessors on horse, wheels, or track. The infantryman's or cavalryman's former obstacles simply no longer exist. There is no need to penetrate woods, climb mountains, or traverse swamps. Helicopter rotors and light planes soar over them all. Low flying, they hug the ground in so-called contour flying so that they will remain unseen by enemy eyes. They skim low across the flat beds of rivers. They slip through passes behind hills or mountains to land suddenly where they are least expected, in the enemy's unprotected rear or flanks. This is vertical envelopment, a new dimension of warfare for the airborne soldier, a tactic proven so effective that each regular pentomic infantry division has its own aviation company to carry heavily armed assault forces for a swift thrust against the enemy. Fresh troops, unwearied by forced road marches or long truck rides, organized to take the field immediately in battle formations. Ready to release a storm of firepower against a surprised, demoralized enemy. Automatic weapons and supporting mortars. Recoilless rifles and artillery. Even the helicopters themselves are being utilized in experimentation going on today as aerial gun platforms to lay down a deadly screen of rocket or machine gun fire. In demonstrations where these firing helicopters are used, they have proved the tactical effectiveness of aerial assault vehicles. Vehicles which, if used in combat on the battlefield of tomorrow, may look considerably different from the helicopters which are demonstrating this effectiveness today. This new mobility for the airborne soldier means greater speed and effectiveness for small unit actions as well as large. A handful of men can be stealthily airlifted to the rear to carry out a variety of special missions and patrols. The vital need for small units with this kind of mobility is dictated by the special circumstances of war as it would be fought in these times. On any battlefield which would exist today or tomorrow, our own forces would be dispersed over wide areas in order to deny the enemy a lucrative target for his firepower. In the same way, the enemy himself would disperse. He, too, to protect his forces from nuclear attack, would do so by scattering them in small units. In such a fluid battle area, mobile patrols become most effective. They can scout out enemy positions and strong points. They can harass and demoralize. They can destroy the lines of communication which link the dispersed elements of the enemy's forces. Then, with the enemy cut off from his own group, they can attack. They can eliminate enemy weapons which may be hidden from our own firepower. They can take prisoners, always a necessary means of acquiring information about enemy operations. Its mission completed, quickly and expeditiously, the patrol retains its mobility by returning to a rendezvous point to be picked up by helicopter or light plane. Even more daring uses of the airborne soldier are being developed. At several stations in the United States, Europe, and the Far East, small groups of volunteer paratroopers, known as Special Forces, are undergoing what is probably the most intensive training ever imposed on American fighting men. These men are conventional soldiers doing an unconventional job. They train as expert infantrymen. Qualifying as parachutists is only the beginning. They must qualify as frogmen, skiers, and mountain climbers as well. They are taught every form of swift, deadly attack. They learn the techniques of defense, armed and unarmed. They learn the fundamentals of demolition, on land and underwater. Improvise is a key word. This transportation may be crudely constructed, but it works. The Special Forces soldier must be able to improvise shelter as well as weapons. And he must do it in any kind of terrain or climate, so that he will not only stay alive, but be comfortable to save his strength to fight and carry out his mission. He learns how to find and catch his food. In short, the Special Forces airborne soldier knows that if he must, he can live off the land like an Indian. But he is, first of all, an expert in modern combat with special schooling in psychological warfare and foreign languages. But superbly self-reliant though he is, the Special Forces airborne soldier is not a lone wolf fighter. When he goes into action, it is always as a member of a highly organized team. This consists of a varying number of weapons men, demolitions men, radio men, medical technician, platoon sergeant, and commanding officer. Each man is an expert in his specialty, but he is so intensively cross-trained, he can take the place of another specialist if necessary. The mission of Special Forces is unique among airborne soldiers, to penetrate deep behind enemy lines, hundreds or thousands of miles, to stay for indefinite periods, to organize, train, and direct native guerrilla bands to fight the enemy from within his own camp with the weapons and skills of modern warfare. A detachment of Special Forces is capable of organizing and training a guerrilla force of 1,500 fighters. The importance of this can be assessed when we remember that General Eisenhower equated the assistance given by the French Maquis as that of 15 divisions. With all his unique qualities, the Special Forces trooper represents a highly developed, but not a revolutionary application of the airborne soldier. The regular airborne soldier, whether committed to action en masse or as a small unit, whether an instrument of the global strategy that directs track, or in the battlefield tactics of vertical envelopment, is simply an aerial extension of the infantryman whose mission on the ground is unchanged, to close with the enemy and destroy him.
With all the dazzling increase in firepower and mobility for the modern fighting man, we must always come back to a basic, timeless truth. In the arena of final decision, the foot soldier ensures the ultimate victory. Now this is Sergeant Stuart Queen, your host for The Big Picture.
The Big Picture is an official report for the armed forces and the American people. Produced by the Army Pictorial Center. Presented by the Department of the Army in cooperation with this station.
Today, the latest weapons, coupled with the fighting skill of the American soldier, stand ready, on the alert all over the world to defend this country, you, the American people, against aggression. This is the Big Picture. an official television report to the nation from the United States Army. Now, to show you part of the big picture, here is Sergeant Stuart Queen.
Since the First War, man has tried to win by striking suddenly at the weakest point of his enemy's defense. Virtually every avenue of surface combat has been explored, and few possibilities have been overlooked in the recurring wars which have dotted man's history since biblical days. Centuries of combat and almost 4 decades of powered flight slipped by before man recognized and proved that victory could be accelerated by means of an attack from a new direction, the sky, vertical envelopment. That's the airborne story.
Another mission, Airborne, en route to attack, to drop from the sky. Part of a tremendous striking force, part of the Airborne story, a story of recent accomplishment that paved the way for myself and the platoon I lead. Why, just a half-century ago, man had never flown in powered flight. A balloon ascent was a spectacle to behold. When the first controlled flights took men into the sky in quest of mastery of the air, that was in 1903, the air age had begun. Another dimension in space was created which one day would lead to a new and important battle tactic. Our Army took the lead in aiding and encouraging a new industry. Aviation, it was called. At first, it was assumed that the only use for these contraptions would be in communications, and they became part of the Signal Corps. In little more than a decade, the airplane received refinements of design that are still going on, and in World War I, proved its use in combat. But it wasn't until after the war that parachutes began their development. Principal users seemed to be daredevil barnstormers who jumped from fragile wings to thrill a Sunday crowd. At Fort Benning, Georgia in 1940, the Army began an extensive program for training and organizing airborne units. The beginnings were unpretentious and to a great degree experimental.
This was the final phase for those of us who went through those first days at Benning. The real thing, out of the door and down to earth in a free shoot. 48 of us came out of the 29th Division, then we split to form the 82nd and 101st. In 1941, we in the world saw a demonstration of the effectiveness of an airborne attack. German Stukas escorted transports across the Mediterranean. Their destination, the island of Crete. Their strength, a battalion. Their mission, seize communications and knock out command machinery. The result, success. But other airborne operations early in World War II involved little more than sudden raids by small bands of parachutists. It was soon found that those lightly armed shock forces needed to be supplied with heavier weapons, reinforcements, and a battle plan which included quick link-up with friendly ground forces. We proved this in 1943. July was the month. Sicily was the place. And according to the newspapers, we in the 82nd had transformed a military concept into one of the world's deadliest fighting machines. This was an aerial assault more ambitious, more daring than anything Hitler or Stalin had ever attempted. The liberation of Sicily was a shadow of things to come, a moment for which all Europe was waiting. Meanwhile, the Nazi leader continued to methodically build up fortifications along the coast. increasing defenses for an attack he figured would come from the English Channel. Our outfit had been transferred to England, and we were caught up in a maelstrom of planning and training, a program that increased in size and tempo. Operation Overlord it was called, and our objective would be the opening of the Western Front. We were mighty proud when we learned that airborne troops would lead the invasion. The climax was approaching, the results of months of preparation, building up supplies and men. In the dim light of the dawn of June 6, 1944, we loaded aboard C-47s, and the 82nd and 101st took to the sky. We had begun the invasion. Our outfit, along with the Screaming Eagles, shooted into flak that was so thick you could practically walk on it. We came down to fight an enemy who was determined to slaughter us or push us back to the sea. But we held on and did our job, which was to capture causeways leading across the flooded areas behind the Normandy beaches. Airborne infantry led the way, liberated the first town from the Nazi yoke.
2 months later, my division, the 101st, teamed up again with the 82nd. We became the backbone of the newly formed 1st Allied Airborne Army. The reason for all this? Operation Market, the invasion of Holland. Along with the 1st British Airborne Division and Polish Brigade, we were to jump and glide into the Netherlands just as the Nazi paratroopers had done 4 years before, and we'd clear a path for the Allied drive to the heart of the Reich. Gliders would play an important part in this operation. We had more than 500 of those silent winged boxcars. They'd carry cargo as well as troops. Great trains of troop carriers and gliders took off from British airfields in the direction of the North Sea and the dunes of the Dutch coast. Our air armada made a giant mobile striking force. More than 2,000 aircraft swept out over the Netherlands. Our objectives were key bridges which linked the canal country together. The gliders came in a bunch. We jumped from a medium altitude. There was a clock-like precision about the whole thing. And our assembly after the drop was considered the best in the history of our airborne effort. Many spots took quite a while to liberate. Despite aid from members of the Dutch resistance groups, it was 3 days before we could get across the Maas River. The Germans didn't give up easily, and the town of Nijmegen got quite a beating before we took it. Our objective, the extremely important bridge at Nijmegen, was safe. Operation Market was the last jump for the 101st and 82nd, but the war was far from over for the Airborne Division. For a Christmas present, we got Bastogne. This small Belgian town gave its name to a period of time we'll never forget. They say that Valley Forge was rough during the American Revolution. Well, it couldn't have been any tougher than trying to dig into the frozen Belgium countryside with 8 desperate Nazi divisions breathing down your neck. It was tough. We held out until reinforcements got through, and the tide was turned in the Battle of the Bulge. General McAuliffe and General Taylor, our commander, led a big list of those of us who were decorated for Bastogne.
But not all airborne activity was taking place in the European theater. There was paratroop activity on the other side of the world. In the Pacific, men were learning about vertical envelopment.
This morning I'll give you a brief demonstration on the functioning of the parachute assembly. The most important thing to remember is to hook your static line snap fastener to the anchor cable in the plane before you jump. If this is done, I'm sure you won't have any trouble. I don't know of a single case of record today where this parachute has failed to open due to the fault of the equipment. As soon as the man has hooked the static line snap fastener to the anchor cable in the plane, he leaves the plane following the length of the static line, which is 15 feet long. The cover breaks off, but the brake cord attaches the cover to the silk at the apex. It pulls the silk from the pack assembly. The line's being pulled back.
These soldiers were additions to a rapidly expanding airborne striking force.
You ready? Stand up and hook up. Check your equipment. Sound off for equipment check. Okay. Not okay. Not okay. 6 okay. 5 okay. 3 okay. 2 okay. Close it up and stand in the door. Is everybody happy? Yeah. Well, let's go. Push on. Push on.
In early 1945, elements of the 11th Airborne Division took to the air. These men had seen a lot of action, but most of it was as foot soldiers. They were on their way to a spot some 40 miles below Manila. These silk canopies floating to earth were the start of a stiffly contested road back to the Philippine capital, a road which became more strongly fortified and which was to include some of the bitterest battles of the Pacific War as the Japs were driven closer to their homeland and closer to their inner line of defense. Only a terrific pounding overcame Jap resistance. This was the last significant phase of airborne activity in World War II. Fighting as foot soldiers, the 11th Division Angels helped to retake important positions. Then, victory in the Pacific canceled plans for an airborne invasion of the Japanese islands.
On the threshold of the atomic age, our flying soldiers loomed as an important force. Post-war training of the airborne soldier began with a concentration on the fundamentals. Fort Bragg became the home of my old outfit, the 82nd. Our military leaders had learned much from wartime operations. And as the warm atmosphere of post-war friendship chilled into a Cold War, it became increasingly important that we should not store away all that we'd learned on the battlefields. And even though several airborne divisions and regimental combat teams were deactivated, the training of individual airborne soldiers was intensified.
In 1950, Korea had flamed into open war. and I was part of the 187th Regimental Combat Team, which was assigned to 8th Army. We were hastily mustered forces of the United Nations, and we went into battle to stave off communist-trained hordes whose supply lines extended all the way back to Moscow. This was the first taste of combat for one of the first aircraft specially developed for airborne operations, the flying boxcars. An outstanding aspect of the airborne phase of the Korean conflict was our development of greatly improved techniques for dropping heavy equipment. For this was the first time in our airborne history that combat troops received intact such essential items as howitzers, trucks, and jeeps. Much of the success of the Korean drops can be attributed to the large amounts of materiel we supplied by air.
Peacetime maneuvers are designed to explore new avenues to winning tactics. Our Army is well aware of the necessity for testing new concepts, proving new methods. There can be no relaxation of standards with the kind of tension that covers the world. Exercise Flashburn was born of the atomic age. Every part of this complicated maneuver, which was based on a simulated atomic attack, was designed use of the latest equipment and information available to commanders. Tactical television played an important role. In a few decades, the parachute had lost its identity with the barnstorming, wing-walking daredevil and has taken its place as a useful tool of war. Great strides have been made in other areas. Aircraft have been designed for the express purpose of serving airborne forces. The C-120 Fairchild packplane, unique tractor trailer of the air. It's equipped with several types of cargo pods which can be easily detached. This versatile flying trailer can arrive as part of an aircraft and then be towed away by a motor vehicle. Another recent product of the engineer's drawing board is the C-123 Avitruck. This plane is designed to land and load troops and equipment on ill-prepared or undeveloped surfaces. The quick loading characteristics of this aircraft eliminate one of the basic faults found in early transports. The Douglas C-124 is a long-distance heavy transport used principally as an airlift plane. Its troop-carrying capacity is 7 times that of wartime aircraft. Sharp contrast to the C-47, workhorse of World War II, whose capacity was 28 paratroopers. And there are even more on the horizon. Yes, we've made quite a record, built an impressive history in a relatively short time. And today's airborne soldiers are taking advantage of the mistakes and successes contained in that history. Every man, every action in this aircraft at this moment is the result of experience and planning. Even the makeup of the platoon has undergone many changes since those first days. But there are some things which haven't changed. The need for care and preparation, for organization, which begins much before we ever board the aircraft. When we coordinate our actions with the other services, my job as jump master makes me responsible for complete understanding with the air crew. No detail is too small when I begin the routine inspection of the aircraft to make certain that everything is in order and to our requirements. There's no such thing as a casual inspection. This C-119 is the aircraft which will be taking us to the drop zone, and everything must be looked at. A sharp-edged projection on an exit door must be taped. Equipment used for special purposes must comply with regulations. The signals are important. A check with the pilot will verify that the lights are in order. Signals are given from the cockpit, and a few seconds delay over the drop zone could mean landing far from the desired spot. The emergency bell is also checked. The anchor line cable has to have holding power, and each seat must be carefully scrutinized to make certain that each has been properly rigged with a safety belt. The first aid kit is an important item to be inspected. And the sick cups. It sometimes happens. A final look at the aerial delivery containers. They must all be properly marked so that it will be possible to tell at a glance what they are and whom they belong to. These containers are loaded aboard cargo planes, and an exact loading procedure must be followed so they'll flow freely down the monorail mechanism when released. In the marshalling area, the platoon puts the finishing touches to packing equipment they'll carry on the jump. Ammunition gets careful wrapping. Next step takes place on the airstrip where the platoon fits parachute and other equipment. This is the last opportunity that the jump master has to make sure that his men have been properly outfitted. Final briefing before takeoff, the pilot jump master conference. The aircrew part of the operation is reviewed, from station time to jump time, and any last-minute changes in plan because of weather or other factors are given here. Yes, a tremendous technical achievement. That's the Airborne story, all in just a few years, from an idea to a big reality. The final minutes move swiftly when the drop zone draws near.
Get ready! Stand up! Hook up! Check your equipment! Sound off for equipment check!
In a moment, the payoff for a lot of work. The results determined by the way we've prepared.
7 okay, 6 okay, 5 okay, 4 okay, 3 okay, 2 okay, 1 okay. Is everybody okay? Yeah!
Flying infantrymen, alert, tough troops, employing speed, firepower, and surprise, ready to defend our country at a moment's notice. A great mobile force, human bolts of thunder, striking from the sky.
The existence of an army capable of moving anywhere on the globe on short notice is an important factor in deterring aggression. The nations that control the air will control the peace. Only by having such security forces can any nation survive, forces which are well equipped and trained. Second place in the next war can only mean the end of Western civilization as we know it. Now this is Sergeant Stuart Queen, inviting you to join us next week for another look at the big picture, the United States Army in action.
The Big Picture is a weekly television report to the nation on the activities of the Army at home and overseas. Produced by the Signal Corps Pictorial Center. Presented by the U.S. Army in cooperation with this station. You can be an important part of the big picture. You can proudly serve with the best equipped, the best trained, the best fighting team in the world today, the United States Army.